Hello, everyone. Welcome to Miami Women Presents Overcoming Obstacles with Daniela Pierre-Bravo, Miami grad of 2012. Welcome, Daniela. So good to have you. I'm Michelle Thomas. I'm the Director of Student Engagement and Diversity for the Farmer School of Business. And I'm so excited to have Daniela here today. Daniela is a reporter for MSNBC's Morning Joe. She is also a best-selling author, speaker, contributor, and producer for NBC's Know Your Value platform. She is the co-author of Earn It, her first solo book, The Other, How to Own Your Power at Work as a Woman of Color, which was released this fall. Wow, I'm really excited to get my hands on that. Daniela has also traveled the country speaking to women and men of all ages and walks of life on how she overcame her struggles, found her voice, learned to advocate for herself effectively, and actually navigated her mental health challenges as an undocumented immigrant. And today we have the pleasure of hearing from her. Wow, what a powerful story you have, Daniela. So let's get into it. And again, welcome to all of our viewers and to you, Daniela, especially. So tell us a little bit about yourself. You were born in Chile, moved to Ohio, and eventually you learned the language and assimilated. So that is such an incredible story and powerful one. Let's hear what you have to say about that and unpack a little bit more of your journey.
Sure. So thank you so much, Michelle, for hosting this. I'm so excited to be chatting with you. I'm originally from Santiago, Chile. I grew up in a small town in Ohio called Lima. And I realized from early on that I was undocumented. I am now a DACA recipient. But growing up and not having the support system or other people who were in the same position as me made me feel like the other, which is the title of the book that I wrote. And more than anything, it felt really lonely, right? So there was a lot of systemic barriers because I was undocumented that I really didn't understand. And I think I was in denial for a long time in my life. And it wasn't until I started getting ready to go to college, doing the things that a lot of high school students do. You work hard and you get the grades and you're involved hoping that, colleges will notice. And I just kept getting closed door after closed door because I didn't check the citizenship box in any of my college applications. And it was actually Miami University who, through a program called the Bridges Program, reached out to my guidance counselor. And, they were looking for high achieving minorities who were involved in extracurriculars and around Ohio. And the guidance counselor would pick, they would pick students at the high school to then go and visit Miami over I think it was over 3 days, and you would get $2,500 one time, I think it was, for the $20,000 or whatever it was. Everybody knows here the real tuition amount a year for Miami, but it's all worth it. So I was invited to go to Miami, and I did a paper application. And the rest is history. But it was still really hard because my family struggled financially a lot. And because of my situation, I couldn't apply for any federal loans or federal scholarships. And so it was literally me saving up money under a mattress, cash, and really paying the bursar's office late all the time, and taking off semesters here and there, trying to figure out how to end the college year. And I managed to do that in 3.5 years. And but still, there was a lot of uncertainty. I didn't know what was going to happen because I was undocumented. So even if I had this great education from this amazing institution, I didn't know if I could use it because of my status. So a lot of uncertainty and not a lot of answers when I was there. So it was a heavy time, but I got through it.
You certainly did. In fact, you persevered and you really show a true grit spirit. I think that that's the lesson, you know, being undocumented, but wanting to persevere anyway is such a story of grit. And just kind of an FYI, that Bridges program is still going on. In fact,
Yay, I love that.
yes, yesterday,
Really makes a difference.
yes, some students here at the Farmer School for Bridges. So yeah, I'm glad that that was an entree for you into, you know, learning more about Miami.
Oh, it changed my life. I mean, it changed my life.
Absolutely. So the summer before you graduated, after you, you know, made that journey, you applied for internships, New York. That's such an exciting city, but it takes a lot of money. And instead of putting your Ohio address on those resumes, you did something very interesting, Daniela. You actually put a New York address on that. How did you think of that? And how did that help you? It's very interesting.
It was a little white lie, Michelle. A little white lie that I thought, you know, because I didn't want people to make excuses for me. I was so used to that in that situation of being like so closed off to everything. And I didn't want the hiring managers to find me qualified on my resume, but then say, oh, she's not local, she's not from here, she can't afford it because it's unpaid. And so, yes, I put a New York City address on my resume when I was actually in Oxford, Ohio. And it was the last semester before I graduated. I had one summer left to get like the experience before the experience. And I've never been to New York. I didn't know anybody in New York, but I thought, you know, not to be cheesy, but like if I'm going to make it anywhere, it's going to be New York because it's so diverse. And I just feel like if I wanted to be a storyteller, which is what I want to do, but I was afraid to say it out loud because of my situation, that was going to give me the best kind of environment to just become a sponge to the places that I hopefully would work at. So I ended up getting a call back from a little unknown agency. It's a marketing agency, Blue Flame, but it's actually owned by P. Diddy, like Sean Combs, Puff Daddy, however you know him. And it houses all the marketing for all of his brands. So Ciroc, Sean John, Bad Boy. And a lot of people didn't know about that little marketing agency that was in-house. And I had a marketing kind of background through Miami. And I was like, okay, I'm going to apply. Like, let me just fake it till I make it. And I ended up getting a call back from the hiring manager. And I remember I was like on King Library studying for an exam. And they, you know, did the screening interview over the phone. And at the end, they're like, okay, well, you know, I think we want to meet you in person for the next round. We see that you're local. Can you come in for an interview tomorrow? Because we want to move quickly with our interview process. And I was like, yeah, I'll be there. I will be there tomorrow. And I was, of course, still in Oxford, Ohio. I didn't have an ID, so I couldn't hop on a plane. I couldn't drive. And so I just ended up getting on a Greyhound bus that night in Cincinnati, 9 stops along the way, 18 hours through the night, got to smelly, stinky Port Authority, cleaned up, I washed, I changed, and I went into this internship interview, not knowing what was going to happen. And then they, you know, it went well. And then at the end, I confessed, you know, I didn't just hop off a subway. I hopped off a bus overnight from Ohio, and they looked at me like I was totally crazy. They were like, you know, we could have done this over Skype, and you know this is unpaid. And I was like, yes, I just want to show you how hungry I am for this opportunity and how much I want to be a part of this. And so they ended up giving me that internship interview. They actually they were the third round. They're like, okay, we'll take you to the third round. And so it was a marketing presentation that I had to do. I did it over email, and I ended up getting on that bus again to start this unpaid internship in New York the last summer before I graduated, still undocumented. Didn't have money that my parents were sending me. Like, I was still paying for Miami. I was like trying to live day by day. I ate a lot of $1 pizzas. I babysat. I walked dogs during my lunch breaks. I promoted at clubs. I was working at bars. Like, I just did whatever I could to be able to like survive that summer in New York. I had another unpaid internship at MTV Networks in their ad sales department. And it was just like a gritty, like scrappy summer that I'm really proud of. But there was a lot of uncertainty, but I didn't focus on that. I focused on the parts that I could control. I focused on the fact that I was just there, right? Even if I was getting coffee and running errands, like I was just soaking it up all in. And the most amazing thing happened that summer that I did not expect and I did not know was going to happen. But I remember June 12th, 2012, I was sitting at my desk and a family member texts me and they go, turn on the TV. And I'm like, there's no TVs in this office. So I run into this little deli in the corner, and in the corner of the deli, there's this TV, and President Obama is delivering his address on DACA, which totally changed my life forever. For those of you that don't know what DACA is, it is a deferred action program that the administration gave out for people like me who were undocumented, who were brought here when they were kids and kind of didn't know what was going on. They were in school, they got good grades, they don't have any criminal history. And it gave us an opportunity not just to have an identity and a work permit, but really gave us a sense of belonging. For so long, there were these messages of not being worthy of being here and constantly trying to prove that you do belong, and you were the only person cheerleading you and who believed that for yourself, because all of the messages around me said otherwise. And I was still in the shadows. Nobody knew about my situation. So it was very lonely. And when DACA came out, there were almost 1 million of us who came out of the woodwork that I didn't even know existed. And so that summer was such a pivotal point in my life and in my career. And it opened the door for me to apply to the NBC Page Program. And then from there, the rest is history.
Well, I'm getting chills because that story is so powerful. And it's the story of so many other people, Daniela, as
Yes.
you said, and the loneliness and the fear. And you have to be resourceful. I know you said you told a little white lie, but I call it resourcefulness.
Yeah.
You figure out a way to be seen and to go above and beyond and to show the hunger, the passion, the drive. Those are all really great life lessons. Sometimes we have to go off script, right, in order to make a path for ourselves.
Yeah.
You did that. And not only did you do it in a gracious way, but you did it and you tried to say that, look at me, this can be done. I did it, you can do it. That kind of message is so powerful. So I don't know if you realize how special that is when you say those things and other people are hearing your message. It just gives them comfort. They feel like they're not alone either. So I really appreciate that. I really do.
Well, like you said, I mean, my story is not unique at all. It's the story of so many hardworking young people in this country who don't start at an equal playing field and have to be scrappy and have to be resourceful in order to get a chance at an equal playing field. And, I am the first person in my family to go to an American college. I'm the oldest of 5. I'm the first person in my family who had a 401k. Like, these are the stories of a lot of Americans who start at a disadvantage, but just find a way to make it work and find a way to earn it. And thank you so much for what you said about helping other people realize what's possible. And it is the only thing that keeps me going with being so raw and honest about my story, because I don't like talking about, my story and feeling unworthy and all of the struggles that I went through, and like talking about those things that I wrote in the book over and over again. I mean, I went there in my book, and I didn't hold anything back with anecdotes and experiences and feelings, because it's not about me. Like, that is what gives me comfort to be a truth teller and a storyteller. And I know that I've realized that once I get uncomfortable talking, then that means that there's something there. Like, I think that there is true storytelling and the type of storytelling that will allow other people to have aha moments of their own. If I get a little uncomfortable, I think that I feel, and I've noticed that the more honest and real I am about my story, and honestly about other stories and promoting other stories out there, it makes me a better storyteller. And at the heart of it, the whole why about, writing these books and being on TV and doing the stories that I do, it's so other people can reflect on themselves through them. And I've been thinking a lot about that feeling of loneliness. And I think at the core of it, my book, The Other, it is a book that talks about our experiences. It is made by our community for our community. It is a career book, but at the end of it, at the core of it, it is sort of a love letter for people who have felt like the other, who felt like they've seen themselves through other people's eyes their entire life, or they're used to chameleoning who they are or fragmenting parts of who they are in order to find psychological safety or belonging or inclusion. And at the core of it, there's loneliness there on that journey. So hopefully, I wrote this book in order for other people not to feel so alone in that journey.
Yeah, I resonate with everything that you're saying, the loneliness, and also putting yourself out there, being comfortable with sharing some parts of yourself that, that's not always very easy to do. But sometimes you have to you have to be brave in the moment and try, because it is about other people. And I love that you took that leap of faith, that chance. And that's just a beautiful story. Before we kind of talk more about the book, The Other, one of the things as you were talking, graduation for you from Miami, your family coming, the moment you crossed the stage. Can you remember that moment? And what was that like for you?
Wow, I talk a little bit about it in the book, but every time that I think about it, I actually graduated a little bit early because I had college credit, and I wanted to, not pay for school forever. And so I didn't graduate with a lot of my friends, but they came to cheer me on, and my family was there. And it was such an immense feeling of gratitude, of happiness, and just overwhelming emotion of being not just the first, but being a part of breaking the generational barriers that existed. That we, there was so much blood, sweat, and tears that went to getting me through college. I mean, I remember sometimes being in my dorm and studying for exams while my entire family, my mom, my dad, and my 4 brothers and sisters would be at a movie theater overnight cleaning the movie theater so that they could send me cash, so that we could graduate together. And I didn't just graduate myself, but I brought my whole family, my whole culture with me. And I did that with a lot of intention. And I think about the opportunities that Miami gave me, and just the ability to think that you could do anything you wanted. I think it was cultivated in that campus and in that space. I'm a confident person, and a lot of the things that happened to me while, I was in college and getting on that bus and, going through college, it was brave, but I also think I was soaked in an environment where the teachers, the people at the school, the students really believed that everybody that came out of there had the whole future ahead of them and they could do whatever they wanted. And so I think that really cultivated my sense of hope and a sense of bravery on going towards the opportunities that I wanted, because I felt like I deserved them. I felt worthy because of the messages that I heard at Miami.
Mm. Thank you for sharing that moment, because that's true. When you go on stage, you represent a collective, the energy, the money, everything that was saved and sacrificed. In that one moment, they call your name and you walk across the stage and it's like, I did it. We did it. It's so beautiful. Thank you for, sharing that. That was really powerful. And can you tell us a little bit more about the book? I'm very, very interested. I want to pick that up, by the way. I want to get that. So
Miami should have it on their campus. Like,
okay,
let's go. Yeah. Yeah. So the book is called The Other: How to Own Your Power at Work as a Woman of Color. And it's kind of like a secondary book from the best-selling book that I wrote with Mika Brzezinski, who is the co-host of MSNBC Morning Joe and has been such a sponsor in my career and a mentor. That book, Earn It, was really, teaching young women how to own and grow their value at the beginning of their career. And I talked about my story and the struggles that I had in that book a little bit. But as I was going out and doing and having conversations about this book throughout the country, the first book, I saw so many people like me who understood that being the other, of feeling not worthy, of trying to be something in order to find inclusion and belonging. And I thought, okay, I need to make this conversation a little bit wider. So this book is a career book. It is for women and really men who want to be able to advocate for themselves better, who want to take up more space and more power so that they can have more influence in order to, be able to expand and advocate for themselves better in their careers. But a lot of the book is really an introspective journey on how to do that. So there's tactical and practical bits of the book, but the first part is really kind of a deep dive into the narratives and the stories that we've told ourselves and the origins of why we believed we are the other. So I get really honest with my story. There are other anecdotes of others, so Black women, Asian women, Afro-Latinas, Middle Eastern women, members of the LGBTQ community, anybody who has felt like they have lost their identity or fragmented parts of who they are in order to find safety. And I sort of connect that into how to better connect that with the pieces of advice that I give, because I don't truly believe that you can take up space and power if you don't reckon with your own sense of identity. And so the book explores that. And it really, makes people feel like their duality and their sense of otherness, which for a lot of us we've hid or downplayed for a long time, is actually a superpower and a competitive advantage as we move along our lives and our careers.
I love that term, superpower. It is, in fact, our superpower, but there are times when that's a lot of weight and a lot of stress and a lot of pressure. And we all talk about the impact of mental health right now. There's so many people that are impacted by that, and they're trying to figure out how to navigate that, get the help that they need. I'm sure there have been times when your mental health has been challenged as well.
Yeah.
Right? It happens to all of us, where we have to really self-care and, think about how we talk to other people to unpack some of those weightier issues to manage our stress. How do you see it, Daniela? How have you been impacted through your journey from a mental health perspective?
Well, self-care is a word that I didn't know or was not introduced to me in my family at all. So I really came to understand what self-care was these last couple of years. And what you're saying is so true. I dedicated a few chapters on talking just about mental health in my book and the impact it has to our sense of identity and how we take up space in the world. and how it takes away our power. And I speak about it from my vantage point and the vantage point of many people like me who have known generational struggle and known what it's like to feel like your identity is threatened. And it is survival mode. I talk about survival mode in my book, and it's that strong bodily familiarity with that fight or flight mode constantly being on. And it is something that I explore and that I find so helpful because in many of our cultures, mental health is a very taboo subject. And so when you're not talking about these things and examining them and how they play out in your own life, then you're not able to understand why you operate the way you do. I found that a lot of times in my career, I would sort of find pressurized situations because I was so used to the adrenaline that came with the struggle, what came with the uncertainty, that I would just seek out these, instances or scenarios that gave me adrenaline that I didn't need, because they started acting against me. And I realized that it was a counterintuitive thing that I had to do, because it started working against me. And I remember I wrote this piece for Cosmopolitan during the pandemic where I really explored how the pandemic showed me that my worth is not predicated on my productivity, that I have a lot more to offer than just my productivity. But equating my worth to my productivity was a product of me living in survival mode for so many years and seeing that survival mode being played out in my own family, right? Like my mom worked 2 and 3 jobs for as long as I've known her, right? And she would go to her waitressing job with her arthritis pain flaring in her feet. And so that's the type of message that I felt like was, going to get me success. And so I think for young people nowadays who are coming into the workplace, we need to break with that sort of sense of survival mode and, generational struggle, because when we've made it and we do deserve a seat at the table and we have a seat at the table, we require more ease in the way we take up space. And we can't do that if we're constantly living with that fight or flight mode.
That's so interesting that you say that, because there are studies that show that, while adrenaline is good, if you constantly do this to your body, it's not sustainable. It will give out. It will revolt. And so what are the tools? You mentioned some of those, but if you could maybe share just some best practices that you've learned to be able to, when you feel this stress, because you're in a very stressful industry, how do you manage that? Or there's some secrets or tips that you can share?
I am a work in progress. And I think there are different things for everybody, but I think for me, breath work is something that's really important. Going to a therapist. I have my rescue dog, Benji, who is like my little source of joy at the end of the day. I think we, overlook, just taking a moment to breathe and just find a little bit of joy in each day, especially when you have so much going on, whether you're in the workplace or you're trying to get through school. Like, we need those moments of rest. Yoga, meditating is something that's important. But I will mention something that I think is super important also, is the energy that we take up from other people. I think is really important to kind of take in mind. I think for a lot of people, and women of color and people of color in general, there's an added layer to this with microaggressions. And a lot of us, when we hear something like a microaggression sent our way, like in a comment where it's off color or it's racist in nature, that also affects our mental health. And we need to be cognizant of that, because I think for a long time, we've taken those comments and either brushed them off or laughed them off or just did whatever we could to make the person who made these comments feel comfortable right? And to like dissuade the uncomfortability of the air. And what happens is that sits in our bodies and we internalize that. And when we don't call it out in real time, we feel like it's our fault. It is a validation that we are different and that we are the problem. I have a few anecdotes in the book where, things were, comments were made that were off color. Like I have this Asian woman who, from her boss, who is a mentor, called her a beautiful China doll, right? Or another anecdote of a young woman whose boss had, her kids were, learning Chinese at school, and she asked her to help their kid with Chinese homework. And the woman, she's like, I'm Filipino and I'm born in Connecticut, right? So these things, if we don't call them out in real time, they sit with us and they build resentment and anger. And again, it turns on that fight or flight mode. So just quickly, I have a few tips on how to deal whenever you get those comments sent your way. One, breathe, because our nervous system automatically just fires up, because for a lot of us, those microaggressions don't just happen once, but they have happened to us all of our lives. And so taking a moment to breathe and regulate your nervous system is really important. The other thing to do is to ask for clarification. It does two things. So when you ask somebody, oh, what did you mean by that? Or, oh, can you clarify what you meant? It does two things. One, it allows them to say they're sorry and realize that their comment was ignorant or uncalled for, because some people don't, they don't know until they hear them repeat it out loud. And that helps us not internalize it and not keep that uncomfortability for ourselves. We let them sit with the discomfort. The second thing that they could do is just double down on their comment and say, yeah, that's what I meant. And now you have real data to either go to HR or go somebody you trust to kind of mediate this and say, this isn't okay. And the other thing that I always like to tell people who experience this is find a support system, do some self-care afterwards, because again, we tend to hold on to those comments and those build up in our system, and it really affects a lot of our mental health. So just a quick tip, I always like to leave practical pieces of advice, and I found that to be one that you can remember and take with you.
Well, thank you for sharing those. That's really important. And, microaggressions over time, as you stated, can be toxic and downright poisonous for our mental health and our bodies. So we've got to put on our armor and really try to protect ourselves and call it out. And also have people, allies. I wanted to ask before we go to questions in the chat, some of the role models that you've had or just allies, both male and female, in your journey, and what did that look like?
Well, at the beginning, I didn't have any mentors or people to look up to, because I lived in a small town and I didn't have access to them. But I think my first internships, they didn't even know they were my mentors, but they gave me these micro moments of mentorships where I could just learn from them on how they led, or how they led a meeting, or how they expressed their ideas, or how they communicated. And that for me was really valuable. And a lot of those women that I saw were Black women that I learned from. And I still kind of remember how they led a room and their demeanors, and that's always stuck with me. And then obviously it was Mika. She gave me a lot of not just advice, but advocated for me in rooms I didn't have access to. She brought me on to write this book with her, which then led to a platform of my own and a second book that I wrote. And now it's opened up a whole community of other women, of Latinas, who have shared and amplified my stories. And I think that's what you realize as you get farther up in your career, that community is the most important thing that you can do and create and cultivate for yourself. And some mentors and allies are right next to us, right? So whether you're starting out in your career, look laterally, who are the people that have your same roles that you can foster a relationship with, because they're not going to be assistants or coordinators forever, right? And I think that we need to kind of build and really take notice of the professional allies that we bring in our space, because they become so important to our growth.
Wow. Look left, look right. I love that. The allies are sitting right next to you. Fantastic. I want to just pivot to some of the questions from our audience. There's a lot in the chat, but one question was obstacles you had to overcome as a Latina in the news business, which I think is, yeah, pretty interesting.
Well, it certainly got better. And in terms of representation across the board. When I started out, though, I was on a small editorial team. I was the only woman. I was the youngest, and I was the only immigrant. So I think it took me a while to be able to advocate for my ideas in a way where I really took up space and I really felt like I contributed, because when you are not like everybody else around you, you tend to downplay yourself. And I talk about this in the book, my conditioning in order to find belonging and the sort of tools of success that gave me, a leg up at the beginning of my career was not the same rules that gave me success as I moved along. So while at the beginning of my career, being scrappy, putting my head down, doing the work, volunteering for the extra hours, getting coffees, all got me noticed for the first and second year. As I moved along and I had a bigger role of influence on the editorial side, where I was actually helping build the show and bringing on new voices and identifying those voices on who to put on TV, I needed to really believe what I was saying. I needed to be direct, and I needed to raise my hand with confidence, and I needed to articulate why it was that I was articulating what I was articulating, right? And so it took me a while, but I think one of the things that really helped me was knowing that the very reason that I was the youngest, that I was the only Latina, allowed me to bring a very different perspective, and that perspective was valuable. And I think that for me was the turning point, to say, I'm in the room and I not only bring a different perspective and experience by being in the room, but I'm also helping amplify all those voices that are like mine that are not in the room, right? And I think that for me was the aha moment, that it wasn't just about me, that I needed to get over this kind of like skittishness and like feeling like the imposter, right? Because if I didn't speak up, I was leaving out those voices that needed to be in that room. And I think for me, that really helped.
Yes. Flipping the script and turning the narrative into something where it's a collective. It isn't about just one woman, one man. It's about all of those voices that can't be heard, and we're trying to represent those. It also is a lot of pressure as well, but it's so necessary that we try. And I love that you have that mindset. I really appreciate that. Another question in the chat: what advice would you give to young newcomers? How did you navigate college applications without documentation? And then finally, would love to hear ways that you could help students as they trailblaze. I think that's the gist of that question. So there's a lot in there, but let's start with just what advice would you give to young newcomers like yourself?
And newcomers into the workplace: hustle, be scrappy, stay extra hours, raise your hand. There's a lot of conversation about, there's a new report that I wrote on today that's live today on McKinsey. McKinsey and Leanin collaborated on a new report. They come out with a report, I think, every year on the state of women at work. And I actually wrote about it. It's live. And, we hear comments like the Great Resignation, quiet quitting. And now the report brings up a new term that's called the Great Breakup, where women leaders are actually breaking up with their companies in larger numbers than ever before. And it's for a lot of reasons: for discontent, for, the feeling of being passed over on promotions, being involved too much in D&I, diversity and inclusion work and not being compensated for it, feeling burned out. So there's all of these messages of women basically not feeling like their companies are giving them the worth they deserve. And my book is geared towards, talking to those women on how to gain that power from a place that you can control, like the power of saying no, the power of delegating, the power of taking up space and understanding your professional ethos, right? I want to be cognizant that my message for people that are coming into the workplace is slightly different. And that is, for the first year or two, you've got to differentiate yourself from the revolving doors of other entry-level people like you. So the working hard, the overextending yourself, all of those things are so important so that you can actually build value, so that you have data in order to better, advocate for that next step and really come to that next step of your career with grit, with that like inner knowing of that you've earned it, right? And so it's about earning it in those beginning phases of your career so that you have enough data and value so that you can go from earning it to owning it. But at the beginning, it's really important to just really do the work and try to get as much experience as possible. How did I navigate college applications without documentation? Well, Miami University was, I think, really, if it wasn't for Miami and for the Bridges program that brought me to the college, that gave me that paper application, I probably wouldn't be able to go to college. And we need, quite frankly, we need more programs like the Bridges program, like that program that seeks out minority, high achieving students in high school, because there's not a lot of education or resources for people like me when I was in high school. And so having these programs on a college level are really important. And then the amount of dollars towards that first semester is so important, because for me, it was like a glimmer of hope. Like that was the only bit of like hope that I had. The $2,500, I don't know how much it is now, but that was like really a glimmer of hope of what, for me, I internalized it as somebody wants to invest in me. Somebody feels like what I have to contribute to this world is important. And I think we need more of that from leadership and from college institutions specifically.
Mm. Well, like I said, Bridges is alive and well. We just hosted our first Bridges session yesterday. So programs like that, I do believe, serve as pipelines, and it serves as a glimmer of hope for families as well as the parent, but the families that support them, that we see you, we understand how hard it is to make ends meet, and anything we can do to contribute to that is helpful. I know in Farmer in particular, we're doing things all the time to help students as well. I would like to also ask you, this was a very interesting question, it was also in the chat. How important has making connections been in your career, and how have those connections contributed to your success you've achieved today? You alluded to Mika Brzezinski with MSNBC's Morning Joe, people like her and others. Could you maybe unpack a little about that?
It's so important. I mean, I talk about this in my book. Relationship equity, professional equity is so important. I think mentorship, of course, is great, but there's only so much that mentorship can do. And we need more sponsors. We need more people that we can say, this is a relationship that has equity in it. This is a two-way street. And people like Mika, really have sponsored opportunities. And that has been so important. The other thing that's really important is that because of my role, I'm a reporter now, but I was a booking producer before. So I made a lot of connections in that way. And a lot of the people that I've met through work, I've kept in contact with. And even people who are not directly connected to your industry, I've always found that there's always a way to cross collaborate. There's always a way to find value in relationship building across industries. Our world is getting so much more interconnected. And, especially if you work in business, those things are so important. And I think for me, I'm a person that's very intentional with my relationship building. So keeping in touch, inviting people to events. Like I have, because of my book, I've been invited to a lot of rooms that I didn't have access to before, of really powerful spaces, especially these last few weeks of, whether it's conferences, whether it's VIP dinners of like CEOs and founders that are Latinas. Like those are really important places. But I also make sure to pay it forward. Like, for example, I have people that I've known, for a couple of weeks that I know that are young Latinas who are designers or whatnot. And if I'm invited to a space where there's going to be fashion CEOs or fashion influencers, I invite them to those spaces, right? So it's all about, yes, making connections to things that are going to build our value, but it's also about building connections on how to pay it forward, because those things come back to you.
I love that. And you said something. I was so excited when you said pay it forward. I talk about this all the time. The more you are given, the more you give out. And it's such an important life lesson. And I love that that's a part of your spirit and who you are, to pay that forward. That's just so powerful. So thank you for sharing that. I would also like to look at the chat. There's a couple of other questions. What would you, in terms of advice, would you have for other Latinas trying to make their mark in the world? That's a big question, but an important one.
Lean into your identity. Being Latina gives us a way to look at the world that is quite different. We have an innate duality. We understand what it means to be at the cusp of two cultures. Latinos make up, I think, 20% of the demographic in this country. Those numbers are only growing. If you work for any company or startup or institution that has a base that is the customers from the U.S., they need your voices in the places of work that you belong to. So, I've heard so many times, because I have a mentorship community called Accessa Community, where we get together in these intimate settings and have a lot of conversations about not just our identity, but the things that we can't talk about at work because we don't feel comfortable or safe. We talk about in these bi-weekly meetings. And I've heard so many times, specifically of Latinas, who feel like they have to downplay who they are or their accents, or not wear hoops at work because they're going to look too Latina and people are going to think certain things about them. But the more of us that there are, and the more of us who feel powerful and confident about who we are, the more space that we bring for other Latinas, that come after us. And I'm telling you, like, being somebody who is, whether you're bilingual or bicultural, like, those things matter and they're valuable, and they've become sort of a soft skill in itself, soft and hard skill in itself. So we really have to lean into that and own that power.
And you're so right. The more of us are in the room, the more it becomes normal. It's just a part, right? A part of every day. One day, hopefully, as we have more voices and people that look like you in the room, it will be very normal and we won't think a thing of it. I would also like to ask you, and this was in the chat too, about your long-term goals. I mean, you're so successful. You've written a couple of books. You have, something coming out, I think you said with McKinsey today, which is just incredible. I've been writing things down, trying to make sure I find all of these after our conversation today. But what comes next for Daniela?
I think I'm taking it one step at a time. I mean, I have a lot of different roles. And I think that I'm in a place right now where I feel very grateful and lucky to be in. And I also know that I worked very hard to get here. So I'd like, to continue reporting. I don't take it lightly that I report here at NBC Universal, which is, I'm so proud to work for this company. And continue writing books, continue being a storyteller. I think that is one of the things that I really hone in on. I talk to a lot of young people, and they're like, well, what should I do? And I don't know what my passion is, or I don't know what my next role should be. I think it's so important to understand the core of what you do and why you do it, And for me, I've had a lot of time to think about this because because I had to write this book. But for me, at the core of it, it's being a storyteller. And at the core of that, it's to help people see themselves, to not feel alone. And I think when you see your career in that way, it gives you more liberty to seek out your why in different ways, right? So if I just said, I want to be on TV and I want to be a reporter, then I would be so focused on just getting reporter jobs, right? And that would be it for the rest of my life. But for me, I believe so much in the power of storytelling that I don't know if one day that's going to be on digital, or if it's going to mean hosting, or if it's going to mean just writing books or just speaking to people. I leave that open-ended, but I know at the core of it, it's storytelling so that people see themselves through the stories that I tell, so that they don't feel so alone. So reporting more, writing more books, getting in front of audience, and getting this book to as many people as possible. Because I've realized that I have a responsibility for the success of this book as a Latina who's given the opportunity to publish a book, one of the few Latinas, right? Because there's not many of us that are Latina authors. It is a huge responsibility for me to make this book a success, not just for myself, but for, again, all of the Latina authors that are coming after me. Because this is a business, this world, everything revolves in a business. And, the better my book does, the more data there is for publishers to see this book by a Latina did well. The next time another Latina author wants to come and sell her book, they have raw, tangible data that says Latina books sell, there's a market, and there's an audience for it. So again, it's sort of seeing my story in a kind of a greater picture. So that's a very long-winded answer to your question.
I loved it. And I know that your family, they must be incredibly proud of you.
Thank you so much.
You've done a lot. And speaking of book, I think we have something to give away, don't we, Daniela? In fact, I think we have 5 people who will be the lucky recipients of your book.
Yay.
So how are we doing this? Are we pulling out names, or I think?
So we have the name. I picked the names already. Okay. They were randomly drawn. They are in that Google Doc. Are you still in there? If not, I'll read them out loud and I'll put them on the screen, and I will be in touch with you afterwards to confirm your address and everything. So I'll just go ahead and read them. Are you okay with that, Michelle?
I can't wait. I'm just sitting on the edge of my seat. I want to see if somebody I know gets this book.
All right. So we have 5 winners. So Rachel Hart, you are our first winner. Allison, Emily, Neil, and Sherry.
This is so fun.
Yeah.
We should do more of these giveaways.
Yeah, so I have copies of your book sitting right behind me. So I will get those out to you guys. I'll reach out today, get your email addresses or your home address, and we'll ship those to you. And Michelle, we have one for you as well.
Yay.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited.
Yeah. Thank you. I'll go ahead and let you wrap it up, Michelle.
Perfect. So we're going to wrap things up with Daniela. Again, love and honor to you. I just am so inspired by your story. I can't wait to read the book. I'm sure the lucky 5 can't wait either. And I wish you nothing but great things to come. And I look forward to more of your reporting on MSNBC. You have a great afternoon, Daniela. Thank you for spending the time with us.
Thank you so much. And again, thank you so much to make space for this conversation. I think it's so important. And I just want to say how thankful I am for this space. And also to all of you listening, Miami is the best place on earth. So I'm just so thankful to have cultivated my early years there. And thank you again for having me.
It's our honor.